Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Madhu Shakure, and welcome to Between the Brackets. In this month's session, we're going to talk about AppScript and AppSheets. So, we use AppScript and AppSheets a lot internally to automate a lot of our processes. So, we have two experts who are going to be joining in to talk and give you all an overview. So, pay attention to a few things. We have all the code snippets linked in the description. And if you're tuning in from LinkedIn, if you're tuning in from YouTube or Twitter, make sure to tag someone, share the stream with somebody else that you think who might find this session interesting. So before further ado, I'm going to bring our two speakers on. Welcome, Jeremy. Welcome, Christian. So, Christian, you are a program manager with us here at Google on AppSheets. I'm guessing a lot of people are using this for different use cases. What are the best things that you've seen?
I'm a product manager on the AppSheet team. Basically, AppSheet really feels like an area that is not so well served by like traditional programming. So the smaller types of workflows, automations, simple like Office or HR administrative types of applications that it's simply not a best use of resources to pull in full engineering resources to do those kind of things. So this is where AppSheet, AppScript, they both kind of complement each other in a certain way. AppSheet is definitely a no-code environment where AppScript is low-code. So it makes it a lot more efficient to build out these types of use cases that are typically used in almost every enterprise or office setting.
So yeah, thank you. And Jeremy, you work with DocuSign, and we know I used DocuSign before, and I hear there's going to be an integration happening between um, um, AppScript and DocuSign.
That is correct. So I've been working at DocuSign for close to a year and a half as part of their APIs developer experience team, basically helping developers work with DocuSign's APIs better in general. DocuSign has many integrations, including integrations with Google Workspace that they've had for some time. So they do have a Gmail add-on, a Google Docs add-on. So they are actually integrated into Gmail, into Google Docs. But that's DocuSign's own integration. We did last year announce in early access under continued testing and improvement an API library for Google AppScript. So for anyone who wants to create a custom integration between Google Workspace and DocuSign, you can do it really easily with AppScript. We make it very easy to call DocuSign APIs through Google AppScript.
Awesome. Okay, so few housekeeping items. This is a live session, so we're going to be taking questions. Don't hesitate to put your questions in the chat. We're going to be paying attention. If you're on Twitter, follow us and also tag. And this is going to be streamed on Twitter live. I know, Christian, your Twitter handle is this is your Twitter handle. Jeremy, I'm going to put Jeremy's on the chat. And one other thing. Stay tuned for the whole session towards the end. We have a survey at the end. As you can see, it's scrolling at the bottom. And if you have any other questions about the session, this or the future sessions, don't hesitate to send us a note to b2b-team@google.com. That being said, I'm going to hand it over to our experts to take it over from here.
Alrighty. So we're going to go through a few slides quickly, just some intros to AppScript and AppSheet, with plenty of time for demos today. Quick agenda for you all. We're basically going to do a little bit of an intro to AppScript and also AppSheet, as we are going to talk about that new integration between AppScript and AppSheet. I'm going to chat a little bit about use cases for AppScript in general, use cases for AppSheet, and then we'll also finally get into that aspect of actually bringing AppScript and AppSheet together, with plenty of demos of AppScript and demos of AppSheet with AppScript together. So yeah, let's dive right in. What I'd like to do first, though, is before getting too deep into AppScript and AppSheet, as Christian noted, AppSheet is what we generally call no code, and AppScript is what we generally call low code. Now, working in APIs a lot, I've seen these terms thrown around. I've seen many other initiatives in low code, many other initiatives in no code, some successful, some unsuccessful. And I want to give a little bit of an intro to the landscape before I get into AppScript and AppSheet. And this will be helpful in understanding why we have two products and why it's taken some time, I think, for Google to actually bring things together here. I've done this before working with other companies, is they want to enter the space of low code, no code. And to give a disclaimer, from what I've seen in the success and failures of this industry, and some key things to understand and some key things to watch out for. Basically, the most vital thing is to just first understand your personas. Who are going to be the users of low code, no code? Now, those seem straightforward. Most of you assume no code are for non-developers, low code are for maybe casual developers. It seems obvious, but surprisingly, companies actually make a mistake around here. We'll first go through the personas. And yeah, basically, there's the non-developer. If you've used AppSheet before, you can see how the non-developer really benefits from AppSheet. You can literally create a customized interactive product without writing any code. So it's targeting the non-developer persona, allowing them to do things that ordinarily would require code. Then we have the casual developer. Admittedly, that's kind of me. I'm a product manager. I work on APIs. I have a computer science degree, but I'm not really a software engineer anymore. And so I can code, but I'm not exactly going to code in a deep framework. And so it's nice to have something where I can just write a little bit of JavaScript and get something going. So I'm usually the casual developer. But we also have the advanced developers, usually the software engineers who are building some larger scale, scalable projects. And these personas are still actually targeted sometimes by these no-code, low-code solutions. And here's the interesting part. In most products I've worked on, we have multiple personas that we take into consideration for our product. And hey, sometimes a user, a customer, can actually be more than one persona. An example I give here is actually for Uber. For anyone who's used Uber, Uber offers the luxury car, black car service. They offer the basic service. They offer Uber Pool. Uber Pool is, it takes more time, but it's lower cost. And when I ask people, which persona would you fit in? The kind of person who's just going for Uber Pool, the one who's looking for, Uber X, the big car? Well, it depends. So I can actually fit in multiple Uber personas depending on my circumstances. My point is, for most products, you really have to prepare your product for many different personas, different customer segments. In this space, in low code, no code, I find it's actually safest, especially starting off, to have a little bit of mutual exclusivity around these three personas. Basically, most low code, no code solutions focus exclusively on the non-developer or the casual developer or the advanced developer. They don't try to build their product to cover both the non-developer and the casual developer. Those that have done that, the functionality tends not to work out. And I think this is how I'm an outsider. I've worked with these teams. I'm an outsider, but it seemed to me that this is really how AppScript and AppSheet happened as two separate initiatives. Yes, AppSheet was acquired by Google, but there was a little bit of, AppSheet had really kept a hyper focus on being a no-code solution focused on the non-developer, whereas AppScript was really more about the casual developer. And today, AppSheet is working with AppScript. So they are working with both personas, but they first really focused on one. And then we're very meticulous and careful about how to enable AppSheet to also work with that casual developer. The other thing I like to highlight when we're talking about low code, no code in general is just the market landscape, some basic use cases for low code, no code. This is also helpful for context understanding where AppScript fits in this and where AppSheet fits in this. AppSheet, it's pretty straightforward. We have our app builders, which are basically, allowing you to build this standalone app. It probably has its own URL, it has a custom interface, but it basically looks and works like its own application. This is what you're usually getting out of AppSheet. Then we have the IFTTTs, the Zapiers, the Workados of the world, these connector tools that are basically about making a bunch of APIs on the web work well together and connecting them with a lot, either less code or no code. So we count really these connector focused products as one kind of feature area of low code, no code. One of my favorites within Google Workspace are those smart documents. We've seen things like Airtable, Quip, which is now part of Salesforce, and over Google Workspace, Google Docs and Google Sheets. These are web-based documents that take advantage of the fact that they're on the web and they actually work with other APIs and allow for dynamic content to happen within these documents. And then finally, we have what I call the embed frameworks. This is basically when you're bringing third-party apps into your own interface, like Gmail's add-ons. So you can actually work with a third-party app inside of the Gmail interface. And when we look at this, okay, we can see that AppSheet clearly fits in the app builder space. What about these connectors, these smart documents, the embed framework? Well, we can see then how that whole mutual exclusivity thing that applies to personas, but not to the product areas in the industry, because AppScript, well, AppScript is working with AppSheet, so it helps with the app builders, but it also allows you to build Gmail add-ons. So it's part of that embed framework bit as well. And I would say that AppScript also really works as a connector. It's very common for AppScript to work with other APIs. So AppScript targets, I'd say, the casual developers, but works with embed frameworks, with smart documents, with app builders. Well, of course, AppSheet is really just focused on being an app builder. Anywho, we're not here just to learn about the industry. Let's get into the cool stuff. We're going to talk next about AppScript, and we're going to get into some samples of some things you can do with AppScript and some tips and tricks for AppScript and AppSheet. So I'm going to hand this over to Christian to talk about AppScript.
Hello. Sorry, I had to unmute myself there. Yeah, so let me just walk through just the basics of AppScript and show a little bit of demo, and then we'll continue to move on. So let me, I'll go ahead and drive the slides from here as well. So I'll present. Alrighty. So basically, if you haven't used AppScript, no worries.
Sorry, Madusha, can you switch screens for?
Oh yeah, go for it. Let me know if we're all good, because I'm actually just looking at the slide at this point, but I'll assume we're all good. So basically, AppScript is a cloud-based low-code development platform, and the really key thing about its key strengths is that it provides a very simplified programmatic access to a variety of Google products. It's coming from Workspace, so it has all of the core Workspace products right then and there. You can fetch content from a document. You can pull down any kind of, or switch data between different documents and slides and sheets and so forth. So it's very useful for any kind of office automation and stuff like that. There's also some more advanced things where you can actually go and create, write some AppScript code that could fetch content from BigQuery. You could use what's called a JDBC connector to connect to Google Cloud SQL. There's also a bunch of other stuff with Geo Maps, Data Studio, even YouTube API. So there's a really, really rich tool set that comes, with AppScript. Just really quickly, kind of giving you an overview of how AppScript works. So there's kind of two main types of AppScripts. One is a standalone. So these are scripts that you essentially can build, and it will have its own entity. It would show up in your Google Drive. It's not specifically bound to a particular document or a container, I guess that's its one. And then of course there's the other one, which is referred to as container bound. So for example, if you have a spreadsheet, a Google Sheet, for example, and you want it to then pull up some of the data, or if you have a form and you want to capture some data when the form is submitted, those would typically be AppScript functions that are bound to a specific document, sheet, doc, slides, etc. All right. In general, AppScript, because of its flexibility, is very useful in a number of use cases. And so Jeremy mentioned casual developer. I tend to not think of them as casual per se, because there's a lot of pretty heavy duty development going on. I think it's more along the lines of a business developer or a tech savvy business expert. So these are people who understand, or they can be subject matter experts, where they really know what the business need they have in front of them, but they happen to have a certain kind of nominal level. They may be professional developers in their past or what have you, but they just need to get a particular job done. So they might want to, or they might need to create a workflow to handle, say, for example, a travel request, or handle some sort of like a workflow approval mechanism. So these are very common examples. And automations, whether they're kicked off by someone just clicking on a custom function in a spreadsheet, or whether it's like time-based or event-based, these are different, just a ton of different ways that people build out automations. And of course, AppScript is also very flexible in the sense that it can be bound to a particular document. For example, a sheet could have like a custom menu that you can have the user click on it and then fire off like a set of operations, a mail merge, for example, go through all of the rows in a spreadsheet and then send an email or something like that. So there's a whole variety of different use cases. Also, when you want to share code, there's this notion of add-ons where you can actually create or extend the behaviors in the workspace products. So Google Docs, Sheets, Slides, you can essentially encapsulate all of the coding or all of the functionality within an add-on. And then these are also published in the Google Workspace Marketplace. So today you can look at all of the different add-ons that are public that are associated with different products. So Google Docs, Sheets, Slides, they all have like a whole host of different types of add-ons that you can install right there and have them provide complementary functionality to the workspace products. And then, of course, there's chat. Chat's another very important technology within Workspace. And of course, chat is in general just a very it's a growing type of new interface where people can, simply just chat with either an actual person behind it, or it can have like a bot agent that can handle like basic requests. So for example, you might want to submit a ticket or do a simple query of something like check a flight or check weather. So there's really any number of examples. And so a lot of times, you'll have like an internal site handling requests. So instead of building out a full site, or instead of just building a full site, you could also build a chat interface and have that chat interface serve as kind of like the conduit by which you can do the basic operations. And then so that's a whole new avenue that you can have your technology or your applications reach the respective users. Okay. So I'll just do a quick demo. I'm going to switch over and just do a real simple demo of how to get started with AppScript. So first
question
off,
before we jump into the demo, very quick question we got from a few of our students who are tuning in. Which language should they learn to be better at AppScript?
Oh yes, that's a good point. I think I forgot to mention it. AppScript is based off of JavaScript. And if you know anything about JavaScript or the history of JavaScript, aside from the name, it doesn't really have much to do or at all to do with Java itself. But basically, JavaScript is a language that developed to essentially aid browsers such that you would have additional functionality. And this came out actually a long time ago. In the 90s, there was JavaScript already available in the browsers. But over the years, the JavaScript has continued to evolve. It's essentially different iterations of JavaScript. It's like ECMAScript or something. And so as JavaScript has evolved, it has become like very universal with regards to how browsers will allow you to have additional functionality in any kind of web-based content. So in many regards, a lot of the modern web applications today, they actually preload, as you actually go to the website, I would say, it actually loads a certain amount of pre-coded JavaScript into your client, and that becomes like a smart client to interact and provide a lot more functionality. The language itself is relatively straightforward. It has kind of like I guess it's somewhat similar to other languages. Probably you could compare it to Java, for example, but the runtime, the way it executes is different. It's an interpreted language. It offers like, a fair amount of leeway with regards to programming, but it's not necessarily like a type. You're not really, basically, I would say JavaScript is extremely easy to use, but it's also sometimes a little bit too flexible. So you can kind of have some issues if you're dealing with different types and stuff like that. So without getting into all the nitty gritty of JavaScript, we can talk about that in more detail. But AppScript itself uses the JavaScript language, and it provides essentially a runtime environment and a cloud-based editing environment for AppScript, which is based off of JavaScript. So essentially the same syntax. And so if you can see my screen right now, this is actually the web-based AppScript development environment, right? So I just go to script.google.com, and that takes me to this home page, and I have all these different projects here. And so just to give you an idea, I'm going to click on a new project, and I'll say, I'll just rename it really quickly. And now I have a function. Maybe I'll change the name. Oh, my keyboard's acting up, sorry. And at this point, I could actually do any number of things. I could use one of the built-in classes or services where I could actually say open by URL, for example. And this is where I could say open up a document. And then maybe once I've established a connection to the document, I could go through and fetch contents or write contents. So that's one example of like one of the built-in AppScript beans or services. Let's see. Here's another one, spreadsheet.app.open by ID. And as you can see here, I could open up a spreadsheet. And then at this point, I could do any number of things like fetch the data or even write to the data. So those are typical usages of common AppScript. But for this simple example, let me just show you how you would build your first AppScript. So I could say something like this. There we go. So there's my bit of code there, and I could click on the run button. You'll notice also we have the ability to even debug. So I can put a little breakpoint there and click debug, and that will set up the environment. So now it's running. It's entirely on its own. It's not necessarily bound to a particular document. And then so now it's waiting for me. So I'll go ahead and click step into or step in, and that will execute that one little log that says hello. And I can just press play and it will finish up. And so anyway, that's a real basic example of how to get started writing some AppScript. Okay. And then later on, when I do another demo, I'll refer back to this project and show you how I could actually call this function or make a modified version of this function and have it being called from an AppSheet app. Okay. So I can turn it back over to, I guess, Jeremy, if that works.
All righty. And yeah, if we can swap screens here, awesome. So yeah, I have a couple other demos I'd love to dive into to show some interesting use cases and some interesting tricks with AppScript. Now to follow up on some Christian's points, as he also pointed out, I'll admit I highlighted AppScript is for casual developers, but as Christian noted, well, AppScript now actually really works with casual developers and advanced developers. I'm highly interested as more of a casual developer, and I've been working with AppScript since its earlier days. But we have actually seen some, from what I've seen in the community, some pretty large scale projects that were built by software engineers entirely on AppScript. The samples today are mostly simple, but they will get progressively more advanced. What I want to start with is one sample. We're going to share a link on this in the description. This one is also published by Google as an easy sample to use. This one is just working really with this is a script built just on top of a Google spreadsheet. But it does work with a few different APIs, including the Gmail API and the Google Finance API. The idea here is that for anyone who has money in the stock market, I've just invested in index funds, but I know this little trick, at least under US tax law, it's called tax loss harvesting, which is basically when the market dips, if a stock that you bought is now lower in value and it's worth less than what you paid for it, you can sell the stock for a tax deduction. So the challenge is knowing when to actually sell those stocks. In the brokerages that I have, they don't alert me as this. They don't have an automatic sell if it falls below that number. So I built something in AppScript to do that. And it basically starts with a Google Sheet. What I can do is take the information on my investments, throw them into this Google Sheet. The big item here is just, okay, here are the name of the stocks. The symbol is important because we are going to use the Google Finance API right inside of Google Sheets. So I note the symbol, how many shares I purchased, basic information for my brokerage. What was the price at which I purchased this stock? And then right within Google Sheets, we can actually call Google Finance, and it'll keep this sheet dynamically updated with the latest stock price. From that, we can calculate, okay, what is the difference between the current price and the purchase price, and did it go negative? So we have Google Finance to keep this spreadsheet up to date as to the prices and when there's a change in the price and when suddenly a stock goes into the negative. And then here is where the script comes along. Now, in this case, the script is built entirely for this particular spreadsheet. So I built it as basically an extension to this sheet. This isn't a standalone script. This is reliant on this particular spreadsheet. And so what this script does is simply when a change is detected to the spreadsheet, which is mostly when Google Finance updates the spreadsheet with a new number based on a new stock price, what this thing will do is, okay, it uses the spreadsheet app API. It can call the current active spreadsheet. So you don't have to do a get call by URL, just call the current spreadsheet. I do have to get the particular worksheet within the spreadsheet. So it's the calculations worksheet. But here it's very easy to say the spreadsheet this is based on, we just need the data on that spreadsheet. We'll get into some other tricks if you have to obtain spreadsheets elsewhere in Google Drive. So, okay, we're looking at the data in our current spreadsheet. We know there's been some sort of an update. Let's see if the update really matters here. We're going to go through the spreadsheet, just traverse all the rows and check row 6, the Google Finance. That's the column for the Google Finance data. We're going to check to see if anything is in the negative. Actually, sorry, that's not the Google Finance column. This is the current price minus purchase price. So it's checking based on the update, is there anything that's worth selling for a deduction? And if there is, it starts to prepare a message that's going to email to me, listing any of the stocks that may be worth tax loss harvesting. And then here it just goes and prepares a message to my Gmail. So now whenever Google Finance reports a stock change, if it's a sizable change, something goes into the negative and may be worth selling for a tax deduction, I'll get an automated email letting me know and letting me know exactly which stocks are affected. This is done with basically 50 lines of code on top of a spreadsheet. So very, very easy, very powerful, utilizing the APIs that are already in Google Spreadsheets and the magic of AppScript. Let's get into something a little bit more advanced. This is just working with one document. Yeah, it works with the Gmail API. It works with Google Finance. Let's work with something else. How about creating documents? How about working with templates? We have another script for that, and it's not that tricky to do. Here's another sample. We have a link to this also in the description. This is another published sample among the Google App Scripts. This one is meant to work with Google Calendar. The idea here is, and admittedly, this was built before a recent feature from a few months ago in Google Calendar. Today in Google Calendar, when I'm creating a meeting, I can select that I'd like to have an agenda document created for that meeting or a discussion document created for that meeting. A few years ago, that feature wasn't available. So I wrote this script, the idea being that in many companies I work at, teams create meetings, they create these invites with 10, 20 people, and there's no agenda. And so we start the meeting without a very clear topic to talk about. So at many companies, they start to say every meeting has to have an agenda. And this I've used at several companies to make it easier to say when you're creating a meeting, this will automatically create an agenda document for you to fill in for that meeting. So this is going to work with the Google Calendar API. It's also going to work then with the Google Docs API. the Google Calendar API so that we can know when there's an event where we need to create an agenda, and then Google Docs to basically create off of a template a nice meeting agenda document for the users to fill in. What basically happens here, I don't want to pull up my own calendar right now, but when I'm creating an event in Google Calendar, I can, in the description, just type, let me see if this pops up. I can type hashtag agenda in the description. And then this script is going to know if the meeting has that hashtag agenda in it to create an agenda document, share it with all of those who are invited to this meeting, and add it to the meeting invite so everyone knows where the agenda document is they can fill in. Now, we also have is a customizable template for the agenda document. So this app actually requires, well, it creates a folder in my Google Drive account that holds onto a template document, as well as all the agenda documents being created for my meetings. The agenda document is customizable. I can format it. I can create a custom template around a theme if needed from like my company, if we have a standard format for all of our documents. But then it also includes placeholder items that the app script can use to automatically fill in parts of the agenda document for me. We're going to see that in practice as well, where what it does is it makes a copy of this template, creates an agenda document for a particular meeting, and it automatically fills in the attendees part of the Google Doc because it knows who I invited, and it can automatically fill that into the Google Doc and then leave it to me to fill in the rest of the agenda. So how is this all possible? Well, it requires a script that connects to Google Calendar, a script that runs when there's an event change in Google Calendar. And this is where I have to also note for any of these scripts, sometimes you need to have special triggers. In this case, within the script, besides the code, we can say that this script, when it's installed, it has a trigger. It's tied into Google Calendar, and it's going to call this function that I created on calendar change when a particular event happens. That event is going to be the calendar itself, and the event is going to be when this calendar has any updates. I wish we could get a little bit more granular, but what we're basically doing is saying whenever something happens in my Google Calendar account, whenever an event is moved even, but more importantly in this case, when a new event is created, if it's created by me and it has that agenda tag, it's going to take action. So we have this trigger, and the trigger then means that in the code, we're going to go to this event on calendar change, and we're going to take action. Okay, we know that something has happened in my Google Calendar account. I can get a list of events. In this case, what I just did is filter to events that I've created a certain amount of time into the future, and that contains that hashtag agenda somewhere in it. So it just grabs any of my events and it filters. And so based off of that, we check to see, okay, is there an event that clearly does have in the description the agenda tag? We're filtering these events further. We're also checking, is this an event that I created so that it's clear that I'm trying to go and trigger this agenda? And if so, what we're also going to do is work with Google Docs a little bit. This is another little thing where we have to basically work with Google Docs to grab that template document, make a copy of the document. So we grab that template document, we made a copy of it, we change the name of it, we say this is the agenda document for this particular meeting, and then we start to fill in the content of that agenda document. We know the attendees who was invited to the calendar event. We can pull that from the calendar API, and then we can actually write to the Google Doc and automatically fill in the Google Doc with very little code here. So this is the other script. The only other trick here to note is, I wanted to make this distributable to anyone in my company. And so if I just give them the script and I tell them connect it to Google Calendar, Well, they also need that agenda document, right? Well, here's a lovely trick in Google Apps Script as well that isn't too tricky. You can go and create a folder for your application. So I went into that. We basically checked to see, is the agenda maker folder in this user's account? If so, hold on to the ID. If not, let's go and create that folder. And let's also make sure that we have a template agenda document. If not, we can go and create that document and fill it in exactly as we want it. So this template document is actually generated the first time I install the script. It literally writes this document in the format that I like. And that also allows me to customize the Google Doc when I create the template programmatically. So in some of these samples, we're just copying documents. In other samples, we're literally creating entirely new documents with the magic of AppScript. So showing you how you can create a script that just works with Google Spreadsheet and a few APIs. Then we've shown how you can have a standalone script that works with Google Drive. It doesn't require any content in Google Drive. It can create it on the fly, and then connects to Google Calendar and is triggered by particular events. There's plenty more we can talk about with AppScript, working with, say, creating add-ons. But I think we're going to get into next is, well, taking the magic of AppScript, again, to also work with AppSheet. So I'm going to hand this back over to Christian.
Okay. Christian, you're muted. Yeah, so before we jump into that, I think we got a lot of questions we got from the audience. And don't be shy. Go on chat, ask any question you want. Very interesting use cases. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of samples that are available. So let's take the first question. This is from Dan. I like this as a low code open for Google Apps. Is there a no code option like Microsoft Power Platform?
Yeah, so that's what we're getting at with AppSheet. AppSheet is essentially no code, although you could argue that if you start integrating AppSheet with other low code or even full code technologies, then it kind of starts to cross over into like low code or even partial code. But in general, the AppSheet core product is a no code. You don't have to write any code to build fully functional apps.
And how is bug testing work? Logging, is that advanced enough? Is there any resources that our developers can tap into? Especially, I see this as a great way to teach anybody computer science. Like it's very introductory. You don't need to install an IDE. How is the ecosystem working right now?
Are you asking just for AppSheet or for both? Because like they both have capabilities. Yeah. So I mean, Jeremy can probably explain, but in one of the demos that you can see the logs. It's all there. You can always access the logs. It's actually utilizing the cloud platform's login facility. AppSheet, in a similar fashion, also has logging. You can go and look at the essentially the usage logs on the AppSheet side of it as well. You can't necessarily create like a breakpoint because there's really no code to do that, but you can actually create kind of some notifications so that you can see like different events occurring in AppSheet. But yeah,
I think AppScript actually does have breakpoints and debugging.
Yeah, it does. I actually showed that, but AppSheet was the one I was talking about. I might have misspoke. Sorry about that. But yeah,
yeah.
So AppSheet doesn't have like code to debug. So yeah.
Yeah, for me in practice, like the scripts I'm writing are highly dependent on like events happening in Google Calendar and like being triggered. So, I can write this code and then I can debug, but if I require that like something run elsewhere, it's a little tricky to do that step-by-step debugging. What I have done instead, and in the code sample, you only see a little bit of it. When I wrote this code, I had a lot more of this, the logging. To really show what's going on, because when I first wrote this, there were a lot of errors and I did have to create much more logging, and then I removed a lot of that before we actually published the sample itself. But yeah, AppScript does include a logger to show you everything that's happening, where things broke, what the errors were, if there was an error, whenever any of these run.
Awesome. One last question before we jump into the next section. I think Dan asked, how can you tackle this AppScript query limits? And we did put a link that Christian just shared with me onto the chat. Christian, over to you.
Oh yeah. So in general, yeah, you can check out the quota limits for AppScript. One thing that is like a few years ago, we also had just like a Workspace Enterprise where you could get like a 30-minute usage time, and then as things continue to evolve, there's a few more SKUs available for Workspace. But yeah, you can bump up your quota limits. Of course, there's many people using AppScript for free, and so you will kind of hit that initial kind of quota. But yeah, that's something that people also discuss ways to kind of work around it. So it's not necessarily increasing the execution time, but making a more efficient bit of code, so you're not constantly waiting on certain processes and things like that.
And I can share another example of these triggers to show how to just be smarter with that. The example that I shared before for Google Calendar, it says to, basically whenever there's a change in Google Calendar, go and trigger the script. So it's not polling, but this can happen a lot if people are adding events to my calendar, if things are being moved around. This thing is getting hit regularly. Luckily, there are only so many times this happens in my calendar per day. I don't get 500 calendar changes in a single day. So this thing is going to hit the query limit. Now, the stock one, well, Google Finance is going to be updating stock prices. Like, they can update it very often. Stocks change every minute. And so I could set this thing to run every time there's a stock change. But that's going to hit the query limit. On top of that, this thing is sending me an email every time there's a stock change and it says the stock is in the negative. So I can get a lot of emails if this is doing this every time Google Finance is updating. So instead, for my own sanity, I set this thing to be time-driven and run, say, every hour. You can set it to run every day instead. For Google Calendar as well, what I could do is say, if I'm okay with the delay that I don't need as soon as I create an event with agenda, the agenda to be created immediately, we can say just run this thing hourly. So there are things like that to just, rather than say have it run every single time an event happens, set it to run less frequently. And for the free accounts, that allows you to, it helps out for your own user experience in addition to, not hitting the query limits.
Awesome. Yeah, keep your questions coming. Sorry, Christian.
Oh no, I'm ready to go.
Okay. Yeah, keep your questions coming. We'll try to answer them on the chat as well. And over to you.
Okay. So basically, yeah, just to shift gears slightly and talk a little bit more about no code, but even a little bit of crossing the bridge to low code as well. So first off, if you haven't seen AppSheet or haven't tried it out, definitely recommend just going to appsheet.com and playing around with it. So if you have like a Google Sheet lying around, you can, in just a matter of minutes, take that Google Sheet and generate a fully functional database web application that is mobile friendly. So what you're looking at here is the AppSheet environment. Essentially, as you can see, there's like a spreadsheet. You can create an app. It would generate your application. And the application follows the structure of your sheet. Now, you could also use backend like SQL databases and Excel or what have you. It just needs to be like cloud accessible. And so all of the typical development, like writing code, going through and kind of doing the full kind of professional coding, gets streamlined up into just very simple. You have your data. Here you go, here's your app. And you can also customize the app as well. So you can customize it in how it looks, the behaviors, you can add special, automations, any number of things. It's fully customizable. But right out of the box, with just a minute or so, you can have a fully functional app that you can then share with users, whether they're on like a mobile device or whether they're accessing from like a desktop browser. Okay. So the focus here is no code. Simplify kind of the processes that allow the subject matter experts to work smarter, I guess, and they can build the solutions that they need, as opposed to relying on the central IT organization to build out solutions for them. So it provides a lot of value. It takes the pressure off of like the traditional IT organizations within companies, and they allow people to essentially build completely custom solutions. It also has built-in governance administration capabilities, so that an IT administration who turns on AppSheet will be able to make sure that specific specific guardrails are put up so that the internal enterprise AppSheet users can stay within a safe zone. And so we see that's how we're seeing the AppSheet being integrated into larger and larger enterprises, where they give them like a set of guidelines. And then they also set up governance rules that allow their creators or their AppSheet users to stay within those kind of safe environments. Okay, so AppSheet and AppScript. So one of the things that I wanted to show today was that we recently announced, by recent, like about 2 months ago or so, an integration between these two technologies. So AppSheet is what you're looking at here. It's essentially, it's no code environment, but there's a new functionality where you can actually take your AppSheet application and connect it to existing AppScript code. So basically it kind of spans the gap there. And as you can see in this screenshot here, you can send parameters over to your function. The function can execute. It can either execute on its own and not worry about it. So it could be kind of like a webhook execution. And then as we're in the process of rolling out, and this might be live, we'll see, but it's in the next few days, we have like a return value functionality so that you can process the response from the app script as it's coming back to your AppSheet application. So anyway, this is all good news for folks who have already built a considerable infrastructure in AppScript, but they want to have the flexibility of a lightweight UI that allows them to call the different AppScript functions and such. And so also another thing about AppScript, building web UIs in AppScript, if you may have tried this, is still very low level. You have to know HTML, CSS, and even client-side JavaScript, which can be somewhat of, it raises the bar of complexity. And this is where AppSheet shines. Like you get essentially a ready-to-run UI without really effort at all. And then you can customize it just using the mechanisms within the AppSheet environment. All right, so just to kind of switch back, what I have here is an example application that I generated not too long ago. It's actually an app that contains 2 data models. So as you can see here on the left side, the apps within AppSheet are broken down into primarily data UX, which is essentially the UI that you're interacting with. There is behaviors, so you can have custom, what we refer as actions. And then there's a whole automation mechanism, which has events-based processes or tasks that they get triggered based off of different types of events. I'll actually go through how that works. But for now, let me just show you really quickly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make an automation within this application here, have it call my AppScript code. So I'll go back to my AppScript project. I'm going to give it a little bit more interesting stuff to do. I'm going to add a parameter. And then I can do something like this. So whatever gets passed to this particular message will, result in a log message that goes in. Now, incidentally, I could even do something like this, mail app.send mail and send the message or whatever. But I think for now, just keep it simple. So by the way, that's essentially built-in email functionality that you get with AppScript. All right, so I won't click run right now because I'm going to connect it back to my AppSheet app. All right, so if I go through, here's my AppSheet app, and I'm going to create an automation. And the cool thing about creating automations is it's very intent aware. It provides suggestions. So in this case, when I have a request, so this is like a simple ticketing mechanism. When a request record is created or updated, send a notification. So I'll go ahead and select that, and that's going to generate all of the automation elements, so events, processes, and tasks that I need for this to work. So in this case, I'm going to go back and say, click on the process here. Instead of send a notification, I want it to call a script. And I'm just kind of changing this really quickly. So at least the naming looks good. Right, and then I'm going to call a script. I'm changing the behavior of the actual automation. I'll do a quick save to make sure everything's synchronized. All right, and then I have like a task, and then now I just have to open up. Yeah, don't worry about that. I'm just like editing it on the fly here. So I need to set up a project here. So if I click on select, and I happen to have a project here, say hello project, that's the one we were just editing. I'll click select. And then it says, oh, okay, you need to choose a function name. So I'll click say hello. And then it has parameters. Because I added that message parameter, I can pass that on, right? So in this case, I'll just go ahead and say, select the user. So incidentally, this is like an expression editor. It's an assistant. And then by putting in the brackets user, that's actually one of the columns in the schema for this application. So it's going to pass along the user email, I guess. All right. So I'll click save and everything will sync up nicely. And so to trigger that automation, all I have to do is create a new record. And so in this case, I have my request UI. And so incidentally, I do have an event next week at our community, which I'll give a quick plug at the end of the session, which shows how to build this application in just a matter of minutes. All right, so the trigger of this, all I'm going to do is create a new record. So I'll just say hello, and that's the description. And it's going to grab the user, which is this name here, actually the email, underlying email, and it's going to just send that off to the actual AppScript code. All right. So I fill out my form, which is going to create a new record. That's going to trigger the automation. The automation is then going to call this script here, and then I'll switch back over to AppScript, and I look for executions. So this is our log. And so I'll just wait for it to update. And so it takes a few seconds for it to update in a second. So, or I can hit refresh. Oh, there we go. So we have this incoming say hello execution that's occurring. And then as it fetches the information, here we go. We have the message that says hello, Christian Schalk, which was the actual user that was supplied via the parameter from AppSheet. So obviously I threw a fair number of things at you fairly quickly, but when we do our App Jam next week on the 26th, I'll go into greater detail on how you can build out automations and how you can say call scripts or send an email and such. So definitely invite you to come to that. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show for now. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff you can do with AppSheet. You can build out applications very easily. You can do integrations with AppScript and so forth. Okay, and there's also this link here that we can pass into the comments. Okay, and that's my demo. And then I think we'll switch back over to Jeremy, if that makes sense.
Yep. So I think we have a few minutes here. Thank you, Christian. I think we have a few minutes here for one more demo. This was my favorite. I literally had whipped this thing up a while back before AppSheet really was working with AppScript at all. And I could see the benefit of having AppSheet here and having AppSheet working with AppScript. The idea here is this is a tool for product managers. As a product manager, I often have to create a certain set of documents around any sort of project we're working on. There's a product requirement document that explains what are we building. There are the persona documents. Who are we creating these? Like for whom is this project for? And those projects tend to reference the personas. So we have here personas through a template that's often through a common template, how we define our customer segments. Project requirement documents through all of a consistent format. They have certain specific things you need to have in these in the requirements documents, including say user stories that rely upon the personas we've defined. And I also have roadmaps where I'm presenting the overall plan with all the projects that we're going to have. And I have to highlight what are our priorities. We set our priorities on our projects and we have a cost value matrix to summarize that. And a nice presentation that also summarizes each of the projects and provides links to those projects. This has worked really at every company I've been at. When I'm building out a product organization, this is a template that we use. And I realized how much we can automate this. Now, there are tools like aha.io that provide this to product managers, but I find most PMs like to actually just work in Google Drive. So I wondered, could we build out a framework like this in Google Drive? And we can with AppScript and Google Sheets. So what I first did is create a Google spreadsheet that really does everything I'd like to do here. It goes and has a, hold on a moment, it has one tab just to list all the projects, one tab to define all the personas that we're going to need for our projects, a means of prioritizing our projects by specifying the value of all of our projects in terms of what matters to the company today? Is it about increasing revenue? Is it about reducing costs? Is customer retention most important to us? And we can do is set how well each of our projects are according to what we're saying are the priorities of our company for the year. Well, we then have our even configuration aspects in our spreadsheet. We can say, hey, you know what? This year, what's more important is increasing customer retention than cost reduction, or increasing revenue versus cost reduction, depending on our goals of the year. So I can customize these things that I'm then using to help me prioritize my projects. I even have a place where I can define all the user stories that can go into a PRD. And then this is a fun spreadsheet. It's kind of working like a relational database, actually, because we can see how the user stories depend on the personas that I defined in a different tab. So this is very cleverly created. I can see that this story applies to a particular project, and these are dynamic lists. So these are specially programmed. That's all done through standard customization in Google Spreadsheets. What gets interesting, though, is how do we take the content of the spreadsheet and go and create a persona or a PRD or a roadmap document? And so I created Google App Scripts that then also generate a custom menu. This is something you can also do with AppScript, is create a custom menu to go and create a PRD, a persona, a roadmap document. And that's we wind up with an auto-generated roadmap with an auto-generated cost value matrix right there for me to present. It looks pretty cool, but in practice, who the heck wants to do all of this in a spreadsheet? As awesome as Google Spreadsheet is, there has to be an interface for this. And at one point, I was trying to hack Google Sites to like make this all work and like work with Google Spreadsheets between Google Forms and Google Spreadsheets. I couldn't get that to work. But then AppSheet came along and allowed me to do two things. One, build an interface on top of this spreadsheet where I can define the personas, I can create projects, I can, within a project, go and create user stories that relate to that project, and it all just updates everything in the spreadsheet. I just mapped this app sheet to the spreadsheet. And then not going to show exactly how it was done here, but basically these app scripts that we're seeing here, these scripts that are defined in the code here to create a roadmap. I don't think we have enough time to go into the coder, but there are scripts here to create a roadmap, to create a PRD. I can go and just click one of these buttons to create a PRD on this project. And what it does is makes a copy of my PRD template and fills in with the information in that spreadsheet. But I don't need to use a spreadsheet. I can do it entirely on this app, an AppSheets that can even work as a mobile app. So I have this lovely spreadsheet combined with AppScript that works with Google Docs to create all these templates in this very simple interface that brings it all together through AppSheet. With that, I think we're down to just 2 minutes. I was going to share some more tips and tricks. Madhusha, I'm not sure if we can go over time, but maybe it's best to do any final Q&A here.
No, I think yeah, we can spend a few more minutes. That's not a problem. And okay. Yeah, if anybody have questions, just put them in the chat, and we'll go get back to them.
Okay, so we'll just quickly go through a couple of extra tips and tricks. Like one thing I want to highlight from this is Google Workspace is very, very flexible, and there are a lot of points that touch Google Apps Script. One of my favorites is that not only within Google Drive are there these actions to let you say right-click on image and edit it in a third-party image editor or send a document over to DocuSign to get signed, but you can actually define your own file type. Like Lucidchart has its own file type in Google Drive, and wouldn't it be lovely for this project I have to be this product management tool that sits in Google Drive, to have not just a link to an app sheet, but to actually have its own file type. So within Google Drive, I can just double click and it would open up that AppSheet app that I've created that does all these interactions. So I have this app sheet that then is accessible directly from Google Drive where all the templates I'm creating are. So let's think creatively. They've done a lot to allow app scripts to be part of the Google Workspace experience. Finally, there's a little bit of an allusion to this, but I've talked about working with the Google Finance APIs. Well, there are a lot of other APIs, not just by Google, that work with AppScript. And there's a trick here. As was asked earlier, what language is best to use AppScript in? Well, it is JavaScript. In particular, it's a form of Node. And over at DocuSign, well, we already had something to auto-generate a Node SDK. And so it wasn't too tricky to adjust that to actually make it work for AppScript. So I think this is something that we may see some improvement on to make it easier and easier over time. But if anyone has an API and you're interested in just making it work more easily with AppScript, it's not that tricky to do. You can actually use a library generator for Node, tweak it, and make a library that works with AppScript that I can easily call then any other external API as long as it's generated, that's actually auto-generated. So those are my tips. I think, Christian, you have some final points you want to highlight.
Oh, yeah. I mean, basically, I wanted to make sure that folks can access a lot of our information available out there already. So I put some links for AppScript development. Obviously, I showed you script.google.com. The docs are available there at develop.google.com and the AppScript community as well. For AppSheet, in a similar fashion, the product right now, you just go to appsheet.com. The reason it has its own appsheet.com domain is because AppSheet was acquired back in January 2020, and we're now in the process of plugging it into all of the Google technologies as well, such as with the AppScript integration, for example. If you go to the next slide, we actually have an event coming up, and this is referenced in our community environment. So if you go to the community.appsheet.com, you're more than welcome to join the community. You can see what's going on with the current AppSheet development. We also have a series of events. We have office hours, and then next on the 26th, that is, I have an event where I'll be walking through how to build the app that I showed you very quickly. It's basically kind of like how to get started literally from scratch and building out a fully functioning app that has like these requests that are, it's a related model. So it's like a request ticketing system where you can essentially log the requests and it will take care of your automation essentially to process the requests and send emails and such. So I'll walk through all of that at the session that we have for next week. Other than that, I think I'm good. It's been a pleasure speaking with everyone today. And so if we have any more time, happy to stick around if we want to do more Q&A.
Yeah, please submit your questions. We can spend a few more minutes if you both are okay with it. And for those who are tuning in from LinkedIn, I know some of those links and comments that we put out didn't go through to you. We'll add those links under the event description. If not, you can check us out on Between the Brackets. I'll put the link right here. And the event description, under the event descriptions, those necessary links will show up as well. So if you're tuning in, if this is the first time you ever tuned into Between the Brackets, make sure to subscribe. We got some amazing events coming up in the next few months. August, we're planning to bring in Earth Engine. Earth Engine just opened up. And we have some GDEs who are going to be demoing some interesting things that they've been doing in collaboration with NASA and a few other great organizations. And another great topic that we've been hearing a lot about is artificial intelligence. We are going to be doing a session on AI ethics. And finally, I know there's a popular topic that's trending these days. It's augmented reality. And the announcement came out that Google Glass is going to make a comeback. So we are going to be excited to bring that session in the fall as well. So that being said, we got some questions coming in. Okay, we got, yeah. So I have a question, by the way, for both of you. So let's say I build an application. Is there, am I only allowed to share it with my own organization, or anybody can log into it? Is that system integration already implemented yet, or what's the situation there?
Yeah, I personally had encountered a few challenges there creating many of these scripts. Some of these scripts were just for myself, but then I published them. And depending on what you're providing, there are different ways of getting them distributed. A short answer, yes, these things can be distributed. You just have to take certain things into account for authentication, authorization, and also really plan it for your script. Like, that first example that I had on for finance, for investments, that was a script built on a spreadsheet. Okay, I can very easily share that spreadsheet and script, and there's a code sample that shows you how to do it. That's pretty easy to just distribute. It's basically take a spreadsheet, take a script, and you're good to go. The Google Calendar one, it's more of a standalone script, and it is something that I can just share as a Google app, actually, that one can install through the workspace, or I can share with colleagues. They have to install it. There's a bit of an authorization bit, where as a user, I have to authorize this script to use Google Calendar, to work with Google Drive. But once I've authorized it, the script has access to the calendar and it can operate on its own. But I still had to take into consideration that this script is copying a template document. And I created that document first for myself, but if I'm sharing just the script, they don't have that document. So what do? Well, I created that script to just create the folder that I need if it doesn't exist, and then create the template document if it doesn't exist. What I also could have done was have a shared Google Doc that I hold onto, and the script will be able to copy it in if I didn't want the script to create the document. But you have to plan ahead of time for that empty state to say, okay, this thing relies on files that I have in my Google Drive account. I better make sure that the script, when it's first loaded, has a way of getting that content into the user's Google Drive account for regular use. And then for AppSheet and AppScript, this is actually the best thing about the new AppScript integration with AppSheet. In the past, I was able to make the script work that I demoed, that the product management tool, work by having AppSheet call AppScript, but through kind of a hacking means. And then this challenge was that we had this Google Sheet, we had these documents, we had the script. I can make the script copy everything, but then if I was going to share AppSheet and have it copy over the Google Sheet, it wouldn't copy over the AppScript. And we needed to basically, with the newer system where AppSheet officially works with AppScript, it's much easier to allow AppScript to run as a standalone script. So then I don't have to copy the AppScript. The AppSheet can then be distributed. It can use a single instance of AppScript, and then the documents have to be copied over, but that's something that I can handle. And that is allowing this app to actually be distributable now, thanks to the new means of integrating AppScript with AppSheet.
Right. And also, just to piggyback onto that, you still, as an end user, have to be able to execute that AppScript. So if someone builds an AppSheet app, and then it's created, it's connected to AppScript, Jeremy's right. You do have to make that AppScript standalone. So, but the end user executing that AppSheet app should have the same authorization to execute the AppScript. In a general sense, for AppSheet, you can share applications. Typically, you can add either just users or fellow creators of the applications, and so it's similar to the Google Docs sharing mechanism, where you can share it with individuals or groups of people. So if you're in your kind of enterprise environment, you typically would share it with a larger group of people. But yeah, it's pretty much following the Google Docs sharing model. Although you have more granularity on how they can access the applications in general.
Awesome. One last question to Christian. Community.appsheet.com. How often do you hold office hours? I just got a few things saying, hey.
Yeah, so office hours, we try to hold them roughly every month or so. I forget if we've been fully every month. It's like every 6 weeks, give or take. And typically we try to do that as much as feasible, or if we have any particular specific features we want to highlight. We have the next office hour is on August 6th. We'll be going through the overall lifecycle management of AppSheet applications. So you can also see that under the events tab. So if you actually go into the community for AppSheet, you can see there's a set of links on the top of the screen there. You will click on the events tab there, and then you'll see all of the upcoming events. So the next one that we have queued up is for the App Jam. It's essentially the soup to nuts, building an app in less than 30 minutes or so. And then we have the office hours for the full application lifecycle, and we're still working out maybe some future topics, as well as plugging in some of our features that we're rolling out.
Awesome.
We definitely want to highlight a lot of the new governance and administration capabilities that's being rolled out in the next few months. So that's probably going to be the areas that we're going to be covering. So yeah.
I think we're going to invite you both again for a follow-up because I think this is going to create a lot of buzz, and there's already interest coming through. For those who are tuning in, we're definitely going to update the description with all these necessary links to the code samples Jeremy shared, and the links that Christian shared, and all the other necessary information. So please drop us a note, make a comment, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our upcoming series that's continuing next month. That being said, thank you so much for both of you for tuning in. We really appreciate the time. I know we put a lot of effort into building demos, putting the deck together. And for those who didn't get a chance to view this, we'll figure out a way to get these questions to our authors, our speakers, post the live stream. So don't forget to subscribe. And we're always looking for feedback. So make sure to fill out our survey. The link is right there. And if you want to get a hold of us, drop us a note here. And if you have any suggestions or follow-ups, other sessions that you think we should continue with. So that being said, thank you, both of you, and have a great day.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.